We'll be creating a monochromatic value scale today in watercolor. We're going to be using that same piece of paper where you created 3 value scales. The first one you did was a gray scale using just black watercolor. Today we will be using watercolor again, so you'll need your watercolor brush, your 16 watercolor set, and your water. Again, we're using the same sheet that you used the other day where you put the gray scale. We're going to be having 2 more scales on this. Today's monochromatic scale and then another one that we'll do later. Remember that also we can use the back to test colors and see if they're okay before we put them in the scale or in any other project. You're going to be wetting your semi-moist watercolors with one color of your choice. You're just going to use one color for today's activity only. So that one color for the entire project. Monochromatic means one color. So the project will only include one color. We will also be using black to make the color darker. In watercolor, white is the paper. Remember that from the last lesson. So in order to make a color lighter, we will let more of the white paper show through. Now, if your palette has any more color than this on it, you might want to pause and clean it before we get started. Otherwise, there's enough room here for us to do the activity. For today, I'm going to select red as my main color for my monochromatic scale. So I'll be making a red monochromatic scale. Middle will be the red, the way it is, the way it comes from the container. So you're going to first wet the red paint and fill it in one of the squares what you would perceive the middle to be. Now, to be technical, there really is no middle. This is 10 spaces, so there isn't a middle. But the 5th one in kind of from either end would be fine. Okay. Next, we'll be adding a little bit of dark, black only, to make them darker. Okay. We'll let that one dry in the middle there while we go ahead and mix up some darks. The first one will be a little bit of red over here on the palette with a tiny bit of black. So we're barely going to touch the black paint there. Mix it in a little bit. Now if it goes too dark too quickly, then you want to go backward a little bit and add water to the puddle. Remember, you can always test it anywhere on your paper before you use it. That looks pretty good, but it does look quite a bit different from red. So I'm going to add a little red. I can go backward very quickly. Just going back to the original red sample. Now I think I have something that would look like a good first step down towards the darks with red. Okay, now we'll add a little bit more dark, making a darker red. Now that went dark very quickly because I had just added some black paint. So now I'm going to go back to red. You can see that the black color goes a long way. It's very strong. So it takes a little bit of time to kind of undo or go backward. And test it out on your paper. See how dark it really is. Well, that's very dark. So that, I have a feeling, is going to go right here. Remember, we can always make these a little darker later. If when they're dry they look not so dark, you can make them darker. We'll add a little bit more black to this last one. There we go. Also notice I'm going in the same direction as I did with the gray scale, darkest to lightest. I'll make that one a little bit darker right now because I can tell it's going to dry light. It's a good idea to have a piece of paper towel nearby. That way if you get out of the lines you can actually clean it up real quick. Now we'll go back to the red. I want to get it a little more red, but this is such a nice dark puddle, I'm going to just continue to use it. Now you could make a whole bunch of different puddles, but it might get hard, to keep track of them, tell which one's which. If you do it in a kind of order on your palette, you might be okay. Otherwise, just go back and forth. For example, this one I'm putting down, it's looking darker than the one to its right, and it's supposed to be darker going that way. So take your paper towel, place it on the square, and you'll see a whole lot is lifted up. Okay, this allows me to try it again. little more red in there. There you go. Now, if it doesn't want you to do it right now, meaning maybe the paper is too wet, you just let it dry. It'll be okay. I'm giving you some pretty good quality paper, so if you let it dry, it will be okay for you. All right, now we're still working our way back towards red. So this next color should be a little more red, but still be kind of dark. So I'm kind of mixing both together, notice. Put that there. That's a nice first step down from the one I just placed earlier, right? Progressively getting darker. Now, going up the scale, we're not going to be adding black at all. We're only going to be using red. So you're going back to your original red sample. Make sure it's nice and clean. Your brush is clean. It's got no black in it. And there's your red. I want to make the red a little more intense while I'm here. So I'm going to put another coat right there. Okay. Now, the next step up, just add water. The color will be lighter just because it's thinner and it's letting more of the paper show through. Now, using my brush like it's a little spoon, add more water to that same puddle. Does it look lighter? Remember what to do if you make a mistake. It's not a big deal. You haven't even barely stained the paper. Find a new spot on the paper towel. Lift some of it up. Okay, because that one was a little too dark. Add just a little color. There. Okay. Now, a little bit more water. Now I'm using the very edge of the palette here. I'm trying to get away from that main puddle. I'm trying to make an even more diluted little area of red, which is, you know, basically pink now. That looks pretty good. That's nice and light. A good first step down from pure white. So here you've got a monochromatic scale using just red plus black going towards the dark, or red plus water going towards the light.